I'm, as I said, Padmaja Sarathy. I'm an educational consultant, and I am an author of 6 books, 5 of them published by alertness publication. And these books focus on children with significant needs, severe and multiple disabilities, moderate to severe disabilities, and also one of the books focuses on behavioral strategies for children with autism. As a matter of fact, I'm just revising that book, and an updated edition should come out in December. And recently, I wrote a book. It's actually a CD, a training CD for paraeducators, addressing different aspects. It has multiple units, and that is published by Education 311. And in addition, I have created mini curriculum guides and a number of toolkits to enable children with significant needs or moderate to severe needs to access learning, to actively participate in learning. And as the slide says, I present at major conferences nationally and internationally, and I consult for school districts and state departments of education. And recently, I founded a nonprofit to help families to engage more actively with their children, and it is called Parent Engagement for Active Child Enrichment Peace. Now let me see who are the participants today. Tell us who you are, whether you are a parent or a teacher or an administrator or a speech therapist or a physical therapist or an occupational therapist, a special educator or a university professor, or maybe one of the categories that I failed to include, so you could click on the other. Do tell us who you are. Okay, we have just a few parents, but lots and lots of therapists and special educators, and the other category, maybe I need to define that much better next time. Anyway, welcome to you all. In this series of 5 webinars, we are going to embark on a journey together to how best to serve children who have moderate to severe disabilities. Of course, our focus much more on the severe end. Today's seminar, which is Techniques and Tips for Serving Children with the Most Significant Needs, will be kind of a basic overview, and it will give you kind of the techniques and tools to engage students more actively in the learning process. And the next time, the second webinar on November 13th, we will focus heavily on content area instruction, reading, science, math, social studies. What do we do to engage our students in this low incidence population in active learning mode? And the third webinar in the series will focus on enhancing communication and choice-making opportunities with adaptations and integrated with technology, particularly assistive technology. In the fourth webinar, I'm excited about that. How do we provide creative art experiences, both fine arts and kind of performing arts for our children with significant needs? And then in the fifth webinar in this series, we will be looking at a number of tools, essential tools in order to increase, enhance, actively engage our students in the learning process. So those are the 5 webinar series, and let me begin with today's basic overview. The challenge frequently that we face when we are working with children with significant needs is we tend to emphasize what the child is not able to do. In other words, the barriers to learning, the communication needs, the cognitive needs, and the motor needs seem to loom large in our minds, and then that colors our instructional activities and also our perception, and also how and what kind of expectations we can have. As I said, in this webinar series, we will embark on a journey together, and we will change our perceptions, and we will engage our students more actively, find ways to engage our students more actively, and we will enable them to participate in meaningful academic and functional activities. And we will look at a number of hands-on, interactive delivery of instruction so that we can expect higher levels of performance and put these students on a positive, successful learning trajectory. So, at the end of this webinar today, what will you gain? You will definitely gain a better understanding of how do we use proactive strategies that are linked to research-recommended practices. The second thing is, frequently, our children with significant needs, due to a variety of reasons, may not readily engage in activities, may not always recognize their environments, the tools, and the learning methodology that we use. So how do we raise their alertness level so that they are able to participate actively? And the third thing is, you are going to increase your knowledge and skills of developing and implementing customized instructional tools so that it matches the needs of your students. Now, let us look at this instructional framework in front of you. Our overarching goal is we want to make sure our students with cognitive, communication, and motor needs are able to attain desirable educational, functional, and life outcomes. So what is the first thing we need to do? What's the first step? We have to get a better grasp of their strengths, their needs. Instead of focusing and considering only what they are not able to do, we will instead focus on what they can do. Once we have a good grasp of our learner characteristics, then we can prepare and develop customized student-specific adaptations and supports. And our instruction and our activities and the materials that we use will be directly linked to the learner characteristics. And we have to make sure all of our activities are not busy activities, but activities with a curricular goal and a functional outcome. And at the same time, we also have to have a system in place for monitoring the students' performance, growth, and reaching desirable outcomes. So what are some essentials that we need in implementing this instructional framework? Frequently, what happens is many of these students, as I said before, are not always actively engaged in learning for a variety of reasons. Over the years, they may have developed learner helplessness. When somebody does everything for them, meals are brought and placed in front of them. The coat is put on them, and the door is opened for them, and the book is read to them without any student engagement. What happens is learner helplessness sets in. By having activities that are learner-focused to engage them actively, what we are going to do, not only can we expect higher levels of performance, but we are also going to engage them very actively in the learning process. So why do we need this active participation? What will it do? It will increase student role and responsibility. That is where your universal design for learning. I am going to go in a later slide a little more into depth into the universal design for learning. But the universal design for learning is an essential step because we want to increase our students' active participation. Once we increase the students' active participation, we are increasing their role and responsibility. We are fostering a development of age-appropriate approaches and attitudes in the students. We are increasing their self-esteem. And to me, one of the most important things that will result from their active participation is we will change positively the perception of peers and other adults. Instead of thinking of these students as someone needing all of the things done for them, we will expect them to be doing some things for themselves. In other words, we will promote self-dependence. And this will increase their interaction with peers as well. So that is why we need universal design for learning, which addresses diverse needs of learners. And that is also the reason why we need the second essential, which is partial participation. Some of our students may not be able to fully participate in an activity. For example, let us take a life skill activity that's done in many life skills classes, and that is they do the laundry. Our student may not be able to turn on the knob in the washing machine or the dryer, but they can definitely drop the clothes with some kind of an adaptation. And the third essential in enabling our student to access learning and to attain desirable outcomes is we want to make sure that instructional delivery is very engaging and very highly interactive so that the student will benefit from that interaction and engagement. However, we cannot forget that we need the use of technology to increase that engagement, both mainstream technology and assistive technology. And one of my major concerns when I look at classrooms serving students with significant needs is the age appropriateness of activities and materials. When you provide materials that are more at the infant level or the preschool level for high school students, then it is not honoring and respecting the age and the grade level of the student. So we have to be very cautious about and conscientious about using age-appropriate activities and materials. Now that we have these essentials, and I will be weaving them throughout this webinar, let us begin at the first step of the instructional framework. What can your student currently do? Let us move away from that model where we were thinking, these are the weaknesses, how are we going to address those weaknesses? Instead, let's focus on what can the student do. Can the student listen to a story or attend to a lesson for a few minutes? Can the student make decisions? Can the student make a choice? Make an yes or no response, maybe aided with an adaptation, a card that says yes and a card that says a participation card that says no, or express like and dislike, happy, sad, towards a story or towards an activity. Can they answer some basic literal questions? Is your student able to make a prediction of what's going to happen next? Is the student able to recall some basic facts and information about the lesson or about the story. So these are some ways you can consider what your student is currently able to do. Now let us look at the student at a somewhat lower complexity level. Is the student, when given two concrete objects, able to make a choice? And these are two familiar objects, I assume. Is the student able to reach and grasp an object, or is the student able to make an eye gaze at the object? Or is the student able to make a response through body movement or body orientation? When the student sees a preferred object that's placed on a white mini board, do you see an increased vocalization? Is the student trying to reach the object with eye gaze or moving the body forward? Is the student showing some change in affect? These are all some things that you want to make sure you consider as you are looking at the learner's characteristics, because you are going to design your activities and your materials based on these learner characteristics. Now we move on to how universal design for learning plays a role in your design of activities. So you have now a grasp of your students' current performance skills. Now, how do you design your instructional activities? So what are the three basic principles of universal design for learning? And the universal design for learning was developed in order to address diverse learner needs. The three component elements are: you present information as a teacher or as an educator or as a parent. You present information to the children with significant needs at different complexity levels using different formats for that presentation. One example would be presenting an adapted summary of a book. Let's take the Gulliver's Travels book, which is used in high school. You would use an adapted summary of that book that may be just total of 10 sentences, and you can present it through a PowerPoint presentation with each slide having no more than 1 or 2 sentences to describe an event in that story. And multiple means of engagement. Now that you have come up with a different formats for presenting the information, now how do we engage the student? How do we draw the attention of the student? How do we sustain the attention of the student? You would use, for example, a mini whiteboard for a student who is functioning at a lower complexity level, and let us say you have the story of the giving tree that you are presenting to your students, and you would attach some objects to some of the pages that you are going to read in the book. Or you may make an adapted book of the story, and you may attach Velcro with Velcro backing, some objects to that book. And as the student is looking at the book, the student may be eye-gazing the object, or the student may be pulling the object to indicate some kind of a response and engagement. And these are designed at different challenge levels, and we will look at actual examples later on in this webinar. And then the third component of universal design for learning is during your planning stage, during your delivery stage, you have made sure that the student has a way for responding and to indicate what the student has been taught and to respond back that the student has gained from that lesson. So you have to provide multiple ways for the student to respond and to demonstrate what he or she has learned from that lesson. Now, using these universal design for instruction, universal design for learning principles, how do you deliver that instruction? What are some techniques that you would use? As I already mentioned, one of the techniques would be PowerPoint presentation that is related to either content area lessons or stories to build, adapted stories to build concept knowledge. You would have visual aids and graphic organizers, and you would use real events, and you would use hands-on activities. Like, for example, you would go take a nature walk, come back. They will, when they are on the nature walk, they will touch a tree and experience a tree, and then you come back and you're doing the story of the giving tree. Then they make the linkage between what they saw outside as the tree and the picture in the book. Then you would do a drama and role play as one of your techniques. For example, the characters in the story. There are two characters in the story of the giving tree. I'm using this example because most of us are familiar with the story of the giving tree. And the two characters are the tree and the boy. And your students can play that role in order to fully grasp the concept of the giving tree. The tree gives, the big idea behind that, and the boy asking the questions, and you can do that role play in order to get a better grasp of the concept, the vocabulary, and to build, of course, social skills and communication skills using that medium. And what does research say? These practices using these real-life activities, real-life events, focusing on the big idea. Are these supported by research? Yes, indeed. As a matter of fact, Browder, who is one of the major authors in the field of significant disabilities, highly recommends using real-life mathematics activities. Later on, we will be looking at how do you set up a mark store in your classroom so that the children can learn money skills. And I just shared with you how the student can go outside, touch and experience, feel, gaze at a tree, and then come back and then learn the story of the giving tree. And also we want to make sure we focus on the big idea. While there are many events that take place, let us say in the story of the giving tree, many times the boy comes back, what we want to focus on is the big concept there, the concept of the tree and the concept of the tree wanting to give each time the boy comes back to ask for something. And one of the things that I do want to mention at this as part of the research recommended practices is systematic prompting and fading where applicable. So one of the things when you are planning your instruction, right at the front, ask yourself, are we focusing on the curriculum objective and the functional objective that this lesson needs to teach? And also determine ahead of time what curriculum objective and IEP objective this lesson is going to address. And one of the things that I do want to mention here is systematic instruction. That is, when you are providing systematic instruction to your students, you are using errorless prompting. And that is, when the student makes an error, you immediately correct that error and point out the correct response. Let us take the example. Let's say the student is identifying a penny and a quarter. If the student points to the quarter instead of the penny, when you ask the student to point to the penny, you make sure immediately you correct that error. And we also have to be careful about the prompts that we use. And already I mentioned about some of the meaningful and functional activities that we can use. So for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and move forward and start with some of the activities that we want to focus on for today. Also, right at the beginning, make sure how your student is going to respond. Is the student going to use yes or no cards? Is the student going to point to pictures? Or is the student going to touch and manipulate the item? This is what I mean by yes or no cards. You prepare ahead of time communication and student response tools to enable your student to be able to use these cards that are attached to craft sticks to make a response. The other tool that you may want to use is as they come in the morning, students who are not using words to communicate can use a greeting tools, particularly in the early childhood, preschool, and early elementary setting. Now let us look at an activity. And this activity is an adapted calendar. In most classrooms, we use an we use a calendar. We go through today is Monday and today is the 28th and go on. And frequently our student is not able to engage fully with that activity because they do not understand the concept of the 28th and the Monday being linked together. So let us look at an example of an adapted calendar. This is how an adapted calendar would look like. In other words, what you're doing, this is an activity that takes place in most classrooms. You pair some concrete objects with the text and you relate an activity that takes place on that day with that day of the week. Let's say you go to the library on Monday. You make sure you attach a book, a mini book, to that Monday so that every Monday when they go to the library, they make the connection, okay, today is Monday, we are going to the library. And similarly, for Tuesday, you may use the computer and you may have a school store that you go to on Wednesday and on and on. So this will not only enable engagement, but will also build concept knowledge and it will build their vocabulary skills. And the other thing that we mentioned about is partial participation. That is one of the essentials. A student may not be able to participate in all of the steps. For example, let us say you have money and you are teaching money. The student may not be able to identify all the coins that you're presenting, but the student may be able to match a picture with the particular coin. The same way, the student may not be able to focus on all the pages in the book. You may just read limited amount of the book and the student is able to eye gaze at one object attached to a page. So make sure there are different ways the student participates and engages with the lesson. Now, going back to that story of the giving tree, one of the ways your student with significant needs may be able to participate is with a graphic organizer that you have created the outline of, and you go outside or in various ways you assemble things that go with the tree. What do trees give us? And then you use this as a tool to build concept knowledge. Do trees give us flowers? Do trees give us leaves? You may go outside, find the leaves and find the flowers, and the student will be able to place them on this graphic organizer. Now next we move on to the technology tools that you will use to enhance your instruction. Particularly in this advancement age of technology, we want to make sure we use both mainstream technology and assistive technology to empower our learners. But we need not abandon low-tech items like an object schedule or a mini board which gives them a choice of yes or no response, happy, sad response, like, dislike response. And then, in addition to that, you use PowerPoint presentation. And one of my favorite assistive technology tools is the I Talk to Communicator to build choice-making skills. And in the next slide, I am going to go into a greater detail about how do we use an I Talk to Communicator. The student will be able to make a choice, assuming you have trained them to make choice, and you have trained them to indicate preferences. They may be able to respond to yes or no questions. They may be able to use iTalk2 to choose one or two items, for example, just before going to lunch or just as they have received their lunch plate. They can make a choice. Do I want to drink first or do I want to eat first? And you may attach a piece of straw, Velcro back, to the iTalk2 communicator on one side and on the red side, let's say, and on the yellow side, you may attach a spoon to indicate eating. And the big step-by-step, which you can pre-program series of directions and instructions. You can use it for a game. You can use it for recipe directions, and it's great for a group activity. Let us say you are playing a game, and that game is what's going to have on my sandwich. And each student can press the device to indicate one response that says, on my sandwich, I'm going to have cheese, or on my sandwich, I'm going to have lettuce, and go on and on and on, and they can participate using this device, and this will be a great device for playing a game. And similarly, you can use the Quick Talker, and another favorite of mine is the Super Talker, to increase communication, increase expression of wants and needs, and to build your students' vocabulary skills. Now let us look at some application. We are going to look at two students. Here is Sam. And Sam can greet you with a hi. He can communicate using just a few words and a couple of phrases. And he can attend to a lesson. This is how you design and note down your students what they can do. Determine what you need to do as you're looking at a student, what they can do. So this is what Sam can do. So now we move on to what are some tools and techniques we would use with Sam based on his learning characteristics. So you would use adapted summaries of stories. You would present concept lessons using PowerPoint presentation. Let's say you have the story of the giving tree. You would use an adapted summary of that story and present it through a PowerPoint presentation. You would use yes/no cards to involve him in the lesson, in addition to expecting him to make a verbal response. Just in case he is not able to make it sometime, you would also provide him with this yes/no card that we saw a picture of before. And one of the things that I want to mention is, frequently we feel our students are not able to engage in writing activities, but with the right tools and techniques they can. You create frame sentences. Let us say you have 3 sentences that tell about the story of the giving tree. There was a tree in the story, there was a boy in the story, and the boy asked the tree for many different things. You can create a bank of words that are paired with a photo, and the student completes the sentence, the framed sentence, with placing that picture combined and paired with the text to complete that sentence. And then you would also use drama and role play to motivate Sam and to engage him in meaningful functional activities and to build his social and communication skills. And the Quick Talker would be a great tool for him, so would step by step, so that he can participate in group activities. For example, I shared with you earlier on a graphic organizer with what trees give with objects. Here I have a different type of a story map that you can use with Sam. These are felt pictures. So they have a felt with Velcro backing that Sam can use to indicate a response. Who are the characters in the story? What is this? Where is the setting of the story taking place? What is an event that's from the story? You may not expect him to do all of them at the same time, so you would break the task down and make sure at different on different days or at different times, as he masters identifying the characters, you might move on to the theme of the story or the setting of the story. And I mentioned about a Mark store, and this is a picture of a Mark store, and Sam can play the role of a cashier, selling some items, and some days he can play the role of the customer buying items from the store. You may begin with just a couple of items and build your store later on to many different items, and you may also have both the items in the beginning that cost just $1 each, and then gradually introduce other amounts for the different items that you sell in the store. Now let's meet another student. This is Diane. Diane functions at a much more lower complexity level. She participates and responds to any kind of presentation of material through eye gaze and vocalization. She attends to stories or lessons very briefly, under a minute, and she has a closed fist position, so sometimes you have to insert, using a craft stick, an object in her hand for her to feel, or you can use an adapted glove. And she is positioned for a large part of the day, and she receives her meals through G-tube, and of course she needs some personal assistance in her personal care needs. So what is one of the first things that you would create for her? You would make sure that she has an object schedule and that she has the opportunity to engage with an adapted, concrete items, event-based calendar. You would use a mini board, and I'm going to click to that to show you an example of how objects are attached to a mini board. You will see in this adapted tools slide a mini board with objects attached. Now I'm going back to Diane, and you would use a mini board and you would attach objects to it so that she can eye gaze at the object, and you begin with teaching her to make choices, to eye gaze at an item that is related to a story and an item that is not related to a story. You would use a lot of on-the-go activities with Diane. What do I mean by on-the-go? When she is being positioned, she could definitely listen to a story, either someone appear reading a story to her, or a story through a bookworm, or she uses an environmental control switch to listen to music. When she is receiving personal care attention, and she can use the object schedule as she is transitioning to the restroom. She can see that she is going to be needing a diaper at that time when she is being changed, so that she will make the connection between personal care and the use of the diaper. And then as she is being changed, someone can show her on a mini board the diaper item and a cleaning cloth, a wipe, and she begins to see these items so that she makes the connection between what is happening to her and these items and increase her concept knowledge as well as vocabulary. One of the techniques in order to draw a student who is functioning at a lower complexity level like Diane into the lesson is when you place those concrete objects on a mini board, or this can be used with other students as well, in order to draw her attention, tap on the board or tap on the book if you're presenting a story so that you grab her attention. And in order to sustain her attention, shine a flashlight to illuminate the object that's attached to the book, or illuminate an object that is attached to the mini board. And make sure you note all the initiation. Is she showing a smile? Is she indicating kind of a head nod? Is she focused on the object? Is she eye-gazing the object? Make sure you note all the initiation so that you can identify clearly how she is responding, and you can make that response a consistent response. Now, these are the adapted tools, a variety of tools, and you can see there are some interactive books, and there are items that are placed on the mini board, and Diane can also use these greeting tools. And I'm going to skip because you have all of this information in the slides, and you can look at it at your leisurely pace. But a couple of things I do want to mention is make sure your student is actively engaged in learning. That's an important thing. If you're reading a story and your student is not engaged and they are just passively receiving that stimuli, then that is not active participation. If they're watching a video, that is not active participation. Make sure that they are interacting with the materials that you are presenting. And then make sure you have a system in place for measuring their ongoing progress. That is extremely important in order to put these students on a growth trajectory and make sure they are continuing to make progress. In the next two slides, you will see a number of resources, including a couple of my books, as well as books by other authors, as well as a number of tools that you can use. And of course, one of the things is you do want to make, use of technology to enhance your students' learning. As we come close to this webinar, please do tell us. As soon as this session is over, you will receive a short survey. So please tell us how we are doing, and be sure to fill in that survey.